So 28th of September. The agenda was issued last Tuesday, 20th of September. 2 deputation requests were received before the deadline of 12 noon on Monday. These were from Miss Amy Sutherland of the Falkirk Operatic Society and Mr Robert Johnson on behalf of the Scottish Association of Flower Arrangement Societies. In respect of agenda item 10, Council HQ Arts Centre, a supplementary agenda advising of this was issued by email on Monday, 26th of September. I have consulted with the leader of the Council and the leader of the Labour Group that we agreed that we intend to take the HQ Arts Centre agenda item at 2 p.m. and we may have to vary the order of the business as we go along. But hopefully we can be expeditious this morning and move things along. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded. A video recording will be posted online shortly after the meeting on the Council's YouTube channel. I will introduce breaks at appropriate stages in the meeting, and as I just said, I may vary order of business to best manage the business of the meeting. And we'll break for lunch at the appropriate point, probably about 1 o'clock. If members who are attending remotely wish to speak, they should use the raise hand icon on the screen. I will ask if all who wish to speak have done so before closing a debate, but at that point it's their responsibility to ensure they attract my attention, even by cutting in verbally, otherwise they may miss the chance to speak. First item of business is the Sederant. Mr Moody.
Thank you, Provost. Provost Bissett.
Present.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
Present.
Councillor Aitchison.
Here.
Councillor Anslow.
Here.
Councillor Binney.
Present.
Councillor Bowes.
Present.
Councillor Brown.
Here.
Councillor Buchanan.
Here.
Councillor Bundy.
Present.
Councillor Colley.
Present.
Councillor Deacon.
Present.
Councillor Devine.
Present.
Councillor Flynn.
Present.
Councillor Forrest.
Present.
Councillor Garner.
Present.
Councillor Hannah.
Here.
Councillor Kelly.
Here.
Councillor Kerr.
Here.
Councillor McCabe.
Here.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Present.
Councillor Murtagh.
And shot.
Councillor Nimmo.
Present.
Councillor Patterson.
Present.
Councillor Patrick.
Present.
Councillor Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Ritchie.
Present.
Councillor Robertson.
Present.
Councillor Sinclair.
Here.
Councillor Spears.
Present.
And Councillor Steenbank.
Present.
Thank you. Queen Elizabeth passed on September the 8th, and this is the first council meeting we've had since then. We'd like to mark her passing with a minute's silence, and I would ask those who can stand to stand and those who want to remain seated to be seated. Thank you. I'm just now going to say a few words, and I'll invite the group leaders to speak on behalf of and say something about Her Majesty, and also former Provost Buchanan if he wishes to speak, and Councillor Ritchie. Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II died on the 8th of September. That day was a day that touched millions of people across the world and will be etched in their memories. The outpouring of grief is a true testament to the love and affection people felt for her. Her duty and service to this country and the Commonwealth for 70 years was outstanding. She touched so many people across the world with her broad smile and her warmth. Her Majesty ruled longer than any other monarch in our history and gave so much of her life to serve others. Her legacy will be remembered for many, many years to come. She was not only a monarch, but a mother, grandmother, great-grandmother dedicated to her family. Trying to balance family life and public life must have been quite a trial. How she managed to serve for 70 years without putting a foot wrong is beyond me. Across the nations of the world, for so many people, meeting Queen Elizabeth simply made their day, and for many that day will remain with them. It has with me, as I recall with fondness, when Councillor Kerr and I stood in line at the Kelpies when Her Majesty opened them. She came along the line and there she was, right in front of me, smiling broadly. Her smile and warmth put everyone at ease. Philip was a wee bit different. He came along and pointed at me and said, "You're only here for a beer," which caused much laughter. It did break the ice though. She was indeed a remarkable woman and a great example to all of us who aim to serve. She loved Scotland and felt at home here, and she clearly chose Scotland as a place to end her days. Rest in peace, ma'am. I now invite Councillor Meiklejohn to speak.
Thank you, Provost. Queen was born into service and head of the Commonwealth. It was not her choice. She was, however, a great ambassador for the country, travelling the world with great affection shown the world over. She's had to appoint and counsel 15 different Prime Ministers of various political colours through some very challenging times, particularly over the last few years, and that is not a role that is well recognised. While there are some who may not be a great lover of the monarchy, what we cannot be denied is for 70 years she dutifully carried out her role to the age of 96. Very few of us will still be working at that age, but she was dedicated to the role right to the end when she could quite easily have put her feet up. I did have the opportunity, as the Provost has indicated as well, to meet the Queen at close quarters when she opened up the section of the canal. I enjoyed a few words with her. My experience was slightly different from Robert's. It was her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, and his sense of humour, as well as his ability to put people at ease, that I remember the most. Irrespective of your personal views, it's important is the fact that she was a mother and a grandmother, and just like any of her own, will be mourned and missed by her family, and our thoughts are with them at this difficult time. Having to share your grief in a very public way must have been very difficult. It's now only right and proper they are given the space and time to adjust. I wish the new King and his family in their new role well. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Meiklejohn. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you. Unlike other group leaders, I have never actually had the privilege of meeting Her Majesty, so I have no personal memories to share with you. But I think that a great many other people, because of the Queen's commitment to Scotland and her many, many visits to places around Scotland, including Falkirk, she has touched the lives of a great many people. I was quite taken by the discussion about her commitment also to service. And I think that's perhaps the message we should all take away with us from her life, is the importance of service to the community. In our case, not to the entire UK community, but to the people in the Falkirk Council area. Many people will have fond memories. Robert and Cecil have talked about theirs, and I'm sure James is going to talk about his fond memories of the Queen. But many other people will have fond memories from when she was here, opening the Kelpies and events of that sort. But sadly, her death has obviously brought sadness as well. Sadness for her own family, obviously, and our hearts go out to them in the same way as our hearts go out to the many other people who are mourning their own loved ones. She was, as Robert said, a mother, a grandmother and a great-grandmother, and many of us and many of our constituents will have had similar losses. What I hope is that we can all take some lessons from the Queen's life, and that we can all learn to, as Cecil said, listen, put people at their ease, talk to one another respectfully, and never forget who we were voted in to serve. If the Queen can give us that legacy, then it is a great one to have left us.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. Councillor Kerr?
Thank you, Provost. As previous speakers have mentioned, the late Queen gave 70 years of public service to the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, as well as the Commonwealth. And as she said, as a young girl, she would devote her whole life to ruling this great nation, to which she did graciously. She loved this great country of ours, spending as much time in Scotland as she could. The heart-wrenching and heart-warming scenes in Edinburgh were breathtaking. It was the people of Scotland appreciated that commitment that she gave to this country. As I already stated, Provost, you and I met Her Majesty at the Kelpies, and it was an honour and a privilege to meet her as we were introduced to her together. I'll never forget that day and always cherish that memory. I will miss her as a sovereign, but her legacy will live on. God bless her. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Spears, do you wish to say a few words?
Thank you, Provost. Firstly, I'd like to extend our sympathy to her family, the losing of our late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, our sovereign. But I would also like to extend the sympathy, being a veteran myself, from the armed forces community and the veterans community in this district. She was our Commander-in-Chief. She was the Commander-in-Chief of my particular corps, the Royal Engineers. The veterans community will miss her greatly, and we will pass our allegiance as we did when we signed our attestation certificate to King Charles. So while we remember the Queen, we can say long live the King.
Thank you, Councillor Spears. And Councillor Buchanan, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Provost. First of all, can I say that the Planning Committee last week was the first meeting of the Council during this period since the Queen has passed, and we had an opportunity there for the silence, and a few words were expressed. I think that everybody spoke very admirably this morning, and I think the words that always render to me is the fact is that quite clearly it's about the service. Councillor Hannah said quite clearly that we can take an example of this, especially new members. Councillors like Councillor Spears and myself, who've done 30 years and obviously more, have given commitment to and service to our communities. And I'm sure that having met all the new councillors that's come in here, I'm very, very pleased with their performances so far, and I'm sure that they're going to be a greater tribute to their communities. Could I say this, that obviously it had affected many, many people. As the leader of the council says, Councillor Maplejohn, there is quite a number of people who maybe not classify themselves as monarchists. But the fact of the matter is that, as has been expressed, she was a mother, a grandmother, and she was a mother to this nation. And in closing the remarks, could I say this? I think that Scotland should be very proud of itself. I think that during the ceremonies that has taken place since the Queen's demise, that Scotland was absolutely magnificent in their support. And as everybody else has said, we now have to move forward with our new King And I would say quite clearly, God bless Her Majesty, and God bless King Charles III. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buchanan. Councillor Richard, do you wish to say a few words, or? Okay. Councillor Kerr, you put your light off. Next item of business is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Bowes?
Provost, it's with regards to item 10A and B. I am a director of the Dobie Hall Trust, and as is evident, if this was to go in certain ways, there is I'm not saying they would, but there is a potential that the Dobie Hall Trust could benefit from these items. Can I refer to Mr. Moody with advice on that?
Yes, thank you, Provost. And Councillor Bowes here is correctly, I think, identifying a connection in terms of Part 5 of the Code of Conduct for councillors, and he's identified that connection as his directorship of the Dobie Hall Trust. The connection arises, as he has indicated, from the potential benefit that the Trust may gain from the decisions in relation to the Town Hall. That connection having been identified, it's then a matter to determine whether the objective test applies, which is, would a member of the public, knowing the facts and circumstances, consider that that connection would influence the decision making which is to come on items 10A or 10B. Now, I understand from discussion with Councillor Bowes that he is minded to take the view that the test does apply. I think, having regard to the previous decisions of the Standards Commission in this particular area, that is a prudent course of action. And I think if Councillor Bowes is declaring that he will recuse himself from those items, that seems to me an entirely appropriate and justified course of action.
Thank you, Mr. Moody, and Provost. Obviously, I will recuse myself for those items. Start.
Thank you, Councillor Bowes. Next item of business is item 3, agenda item 3, minutes and information bulletin. 3A, minute of meeting of Falkirk Council held on 23rd of June, pages 8 to 12. Can we agree that is a true and accurate record?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 3B, volume of minutes, volume 1. Anybody got any questions on that?
Provost, I have a question in relation to the Appeals Committee minutes on page 1. The appeal in this case was upheld, but I would have thought that a statement of reasons might have been appropriate as to why they reached the outcome that they did. There's nothing contained in the minute.
Mr. Moody.
I think, first of all, I think the first point to make is this is a confidential item of business held in private, and this is the public minute which is available to all. But secondly, it's not the custom and practice of the Appeals Committee to record reasons on its minutes, so there's no departure from our normal approach in the minute that you see in the volume.
Provost, just as a supplementary to that, Colin, is that something that we could think about for the future then? Because I think it's important that we know why these decisions are being taken. We don't have to identify anybody, we just need to know the reasons behind the decision.
I think from my experience of the practice of the Appeals Committee, the reasons can sometimes be varied among those members supporting any particular decision, whether to uphold or not uphold the decision of the manager. So I think it may be a challenge to identify a collective and unified reason for that. But I understand the point that you're making, Councillor Nimmo, so I'm happy to take it away to think about it. But my initial thought would be no, that it wouldn't have reasons attached to it, but I'll give it further consideration.
Thank you. Next item of business is 3C, information bulletin. Does anyone have any questions on that? No, thank you. Next item, agenda item 4, rolling action log, pages 13 to 17. Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Provost. And this item gives members information just on the progress of any reports which have been asked for by Council. There are comments at the side of the rolling action log which give any explanation where the item isn't on the agenda where that's expected. The rolling action log appears to be up to date, but it's available for any member to ask questions in relation to the items listed on it.
Thank you. Any questions?
Provost.
Councillor Nimmo.
2 or 3 points. The first one relates to item 44, page 14. Now, I know we've had verbal updates in the past regarding this, and I think the last update there was only 2 outstanding cases. Can we maybe get an update as to whether or not these 2 have been cleared?
Mrs. Algie, would you like to answer that, please?
Yes, thank you, Provost. Provost, I can confirm that there is now 1 outstanding case and we're still actively working to clear that particular case. And we will provide a report to Council on it with an update in December as noted in the action log. Thank you.
Thank you.
The second point, Provost, it's item 558, page 15. There's a report coming forward in December. I'm just wondering if this report will provide us with options as to what we're going to be taking forward in the future.
Mr. Benny, would you like to answer that question, please?
Through you, Provost, the report coming in December will outline a methodology that we recommend using across the wards of Falkirk Council, and will identify several pilot areas to try out that methodology and then propose to bring a report back later next year on how the pilot projects worked and our belief about whether they should be rolled out across the Falkirk area.
Thanks for that, Malcolm. Provost, my last point's in relation to 591 on page 16. It's just to get an update on the timescales involved with that.
Provost, I think that would be for Patricia Cassidy to respond. I think she may have been slightly delayed by another urgent matter in joining the meeting, so perhaps we could come back to that question later on.
Yeah, thank you. We have 5 motions on business. Oh, sorry, Mr. McCabe.
Thanks, Provost. I did have my light on, then I switched it off as Councillor Nimmo was speaking. Councillor Nimmo actually raised the 2 points that I intended raising. I'd just like just a wee bit of clarification on the second of Alan's points, strategic property review. This has been ongoing for 17 months, and we were advised that the report would be coming in October. And it's now coming in December. We've just heard from Mr. Benny that they're looking to roll out some, can't remember the term that he used. It just concerns me a wee bit. It's something that's taking this long on something as fundamental as a strategic property review. Should take this long, and sometime in the future after December we're going to get these examples of how we intend to roll this out across the council. I thought we would have been better placed before now. I'd just like a wee bit of feedback from Mr. Benny, if you don't mind.
Thanks, Councillor Spears. Mr. Benny, would you like to take up the questions, please?
Through you, Provost. The action log said that the report would always come to either October or December, and it's my view that we want the report to be as advanced as possible, and therefore the December meeting's more appropriate. As the action plan outlines, a new team's been put in place at Place Services, and we're doing a fundamental review of the SPR. But I would want to reassure elected members that a lot of progress is being made in terms of progressing the departure from buildings that have been identified in the report that came forward last year. Progress is being made on the stadium. So officers are working forward, but as I said, I'm keen that the report that comes before councillors is as informed and positive as possible, and therefore it will come in December, and hopefully that will give you all the information that you require.
Thank you. Councillor McCabe, would you like to come back on that? Or okay, thank you. Councillor Meikle-John.
Just again to ask Mr Bennett on that particular matter. I mean, just people's information, strategic property review has gone on since 2016, but during that period of time there has been a number of areas progressed within that. So while we are awaiting a report that's probably going to more look at some of our community facilities, there has been progress, and I just wonder if you could confirm that over that period of time that there has been changes and investments and disposals that has taken forward that strategic property review.
Through you, Provost. Yeah, I'm happy to confirm that is absolutely the case. Progress is being made. There are a number of buildings that are either have been vacated or will be shortly vacated in the coming months. And I'm happy to get Paul to give a short briefing for elected members to summarise some of that activity, just to reassure you in the meantime between now and the report coming in December.
Thank you. There are 5 motions on the agenda, but after discussion with the Labour Group leader and the SNP leader, I've decided to take these to a special council meeting in October in order to expedite the business for today. So the 5 motions will be going to an October special council meeting. Next item of business is agenda item 5, referral from executive, Treasury Management Annual Review. The report is by the Director of Transformation, Communities and Corporate Services, pages 18 to 32. Mrs Templeman, will you speak to that report, please?
Thank you, Provost. This report is part of a group of reports that we present annually to meet the requirements of the Prudential and the Treasury Management Codes. And essentially this report shows how we performed against the strategy that was approved by Council for 21-22. The report's already been considered by the Executive and it's referred on to Council for noting. The report covers a lot of ground, including an economic review, but it is retrospective. It's looking back at what's happened in 21-22, and clearly we're quite far into the new financial year, and the position has changed significantly since the end of 21-22. The volatility in the financial markets, particularly what we've seen in the last week, means that the picture that we've set out in section 4 has changed quite markedly. So before the paper was considered by Executive, there was a training session held with members for the 19th of August. And that session highlighted that it's the capital activity that feeds the Treasury Management activity, and in turn the Treasury Management activity has an impact on the revenue budget. Section 4.2 of the report summarises the capital expenditure in 21-22 and the borrowing requirement to support that expenditure. And that links back to the outturn reports that members have already seen for both capital and revenue for 21-22, and those came to the June Executive this year. So this report effectively flows from the information that was included in those papers. Importantly, the 21-22 report states that the Council stayed within the parameters that were approved in the Treasury Management Strategy, and the report demonstrates that the Council complied with its legislative and regulatory requirements, and that the objectives of the strategy were met for both borrowing and investments. I'm happy to take any questions, Provost.
Thank you, Mrs Templeman. Councillor Meikle-John, do you have a motion at all?
Oh, sorry, Provost, I've got myself confused there. really, Provost, all I want to say is the paper was presented to the Executive. The Treasury Management Review provides a framework and an update on our borrowing to be able to meet our capital programme and other commitments. It's important that members are cited on the prudential indicators, particularly in such a volatile financial climate, and it's important that we review that and manage that on a regular basis to ensure that we can actually meet our obligations. There was a number of questions at the Executive. There was no division at the Executive, so I'm happy to move the report as per the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Hannah, do you have any amendment to this at all?
I have no amendments to it, no, thank you. I appreciated Amanda's training in advance of us looking at this on the Executive, and I suspect we may be coming back for more.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr, do you have any amendment on this?
No amendments, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Spears, do you have any?
No amendments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Can I formally second, please?
Thanks very much.
And should I require come back in?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Steinbank.
Thank you. It's not an amendment. I just have a question in relation to the volatility of the markets. Obviously, you had talked about at the start of the meeting, Amanda. I just note on page 26, the borrowing strategy, that there's been a slight adjustment for a slight reduction in short-term borrowing compared to the same time last year, and a 10 million increase in long-term borrowing. Could you perhaps give us just some context about how the volatility that we're reading about in the papers, and obviously people are very worried about, might potentially impact upon this strategy, as I do think it is noted that volatility is a factor within that specific part of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. So the market is quite challenging just now, and we'll come on to that a little bit more when we talk about the capital programme review paper, which is later in the agenda. As we're seeing the potential cost for the government to borrow rise, that then impacts on the gilt rates, that then impacts on the rates that the council can borrow at from the PWLB. So we've seen really marked rises in the cost of long-term borrowing. Similarly, short-term borrowing, for the last few years, short-term borrowing has been incredibly cheap compared to long-term borrowing, albeit long-term borrowing has been relatively cheap as well. Starting to see a little bit that gap sort of starting to reduce. So all our borrowing is becoming more expensive, and we will have to keep that under constant review to make sure that what we're borrowing is affordable. We have got a meeting next week with our Treasury Management Advisors, who we speak to in advance of doing any borrowing. So we would speak to them to look at what they estimate the market's going to do, what they estimate the rates are going to do, and we would schedule in our borrowing and try to borrow accordingly. So that meeting's happening next week to look ahead. I think that the difficulty we have is because everything's so volatile, any kind of prediction is really, really difficult right now. But it's entirely possible that should interest rates particularly take the trajectory that is projected, that we may have to amend our borrowing plans and our investment plans going forward.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions for Mrs. Templeman? Councillor?
Happy to be corrected on this matter, but just in terms of the sustainability impact, there was an assessment that's not required for this. Am I right in thinking if we're whatever financial establishments we are using or borrowing from, if they're investing in fossil fuels, would we not be running out on an assessment on that?
Mrs. Templeman?
Thank you, Provost. Well, we overwhelmingly we borrow from the government, from the Public Works Loan Board. So that's the vast majority of our borrowing. We do on occasion borrow money from other local authorities for our short-term borrowing, but we're very sort of prudent, we're very risk averse, particularly from a Treasury point of view, and so we don't tend to borrow from other areas. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I do appreciate it. It would just be great if that was just outlined in the reports, just to say thank you.
Thank you. We don't have any amendments to Councillor Meikle-John's motion, so can we agree on the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Pages 33 to 59. Mr. Lawrie.
Thank you, Provost, and good morning to all. The purpose of this report is to seek approval of the council plan, and I think it's important with the election of a new council that the council reviews and resets its priorities in the context both of its best value requirements and the challenging landscape it finds itself in. And that landscape comprises of a cost of living crisis with increased poverty and deepening inequality, the fact that the council faces a financial crisis of its own and tough decisions need to be made, the need to focus resources on both immediate need and creating a positive and bright future for our communities, and a need to focus on collaborative leadership, partnership working, and the transformation of services. The council plan seeks to address the best value themes in relation to vision and strategic direction, performance and pace of improvement, the effective use of resources, financial sustainability, transformation and workforce, partnership, community and continuous improvement. It replaces the previous corporate plan and business plan and sits in the context of the Falkirk plan agreed earlier this year by the council and by community planning partners. It links clearly to the council's financial strategy, which is considered later on this agenda. The plan itself is set out at Appendix 1 to the report. It sets out what the council aims to achieve over the next 5 years and how that will be done, making the most effective use of resources to deliver services. It recognises that the council cannot achieve these goals on its own and must work with partners, public, private, voluntary sectors, and of course, our communities. The proposed vision is to create strong communities where inequalities are reduced and lives are improved. And the proposed council priorities within that are supporting stronger and healthier communities, promoting opportunities and educational attainment and reducing inequalities, and supporting a thriving economy and a green transition. And within these, the council plan contains a series of we will statements, the actions and projects to be undertaken to deliver on the council vision and priorities. And progress against each of these will be tracked through key success measures at the core of the council's performance management framework, and that framework is outlined at Appendix 2. The plan also sets out the council's values of being responsive and innovative, trusted and ambitious, and how we propose to take these forward to support the delivery of the plan. And it also includes the 3 enablers. So these are financial sustainability, transformation and improvement, and the workforce plan, which are fundamental to successful outcomes and the progress the council needs to make. The plan will be subject to an annual refresh, which will take into account progress in delivery on the financial strategy. And given the uncertainty of the financial outlook, we've just touched on that, this will ensure that the council takes stock of commitments and resources at regular intervals to continue the effective management of the council's business. In terms of consultation, the report sets out the fact that the Falkirk plan public consultation feedback was used as a basis for the council plan and the engagement within the council and with services and with elected members. And the recommendation is set out paragraph 2. I'm happy to take any questions, Provost, along with colleagues. Thank you.
Councillor Meikle-John, do you have a motion?
Indeed I do, Provost. As is And I want to just start by thanking officers in pulling this together in a relatively short space of time, recognising that there are a whole host of other pressures right now on people's time and resource. But it's been an important piece of work and sets out the direction of the council. It sets the strategic direction of the plan and our priorities for the next 5 years, and indeed how we will deliver them, and the resources required. Much of what's in the council plan mirrors that of which is in the Falkirk plan, which was developed and agreed with our community planning partners, recognising the collective sum, commitment and resource can achieve much more working for a common goal than we can individually, and it also makes best use of the resources, particularly at a time when public sector finance so significantly pressured across the piece. And it allows us to be very focused on what it is we are going to deliver on. By focusing on a few broad priorities, which are supporting stronger communities, promoting opportunities in education, and reducing inequalities, supporting thriving and green economies and transition will help drive policy and the resources going forward, and that is the right thing to do, because that will what should give us the greatest impact in our communities, particularly at such a difficult time. Having looked again quite closely at the council plan and reflected on it, I'm sure all of us will see the various aspects of our individual political manifestos within the council plan, and therefore the collective will to deliver on that should help us make progress. We will be able to monitor the progress closely, both with nationally and locally performance indicators. Those are detailed within the appendix, and these will help us to be able to measure where we are across Scotland as well as locally, and make sure that we are directing the resources to the right areas. Our best value report highlighted the need for the council plan to act as an enabler for financial sustainability, along with transformation of our organisation and services and workforce plans. The next report will provide the framework of how we'll be able to resource that over the piece, and that will be very critical to the delivery of the priorities that we have. There was extensive consultation with both partners and our communities during development of the Falkirk plan, which was approved a few months ago, and with very close alignment to the council plan, further consultation was indeed carried out with all elected members, enabling them to have an input to the plan going forward. It is, however, important to note that the plan will require to be dynamic and will be subject to change to reflect on the environment that we're currently operating in, that annual update will indeed give us the opportunity to adjust accordingly. So we have a good and robust plan going forward. I'm therefore happy to move the recommendations in the report, Provost. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Michael John. Do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Provost. Happy to second and reserve the right.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Councillor Hannah, do you have an amendment?
I don't have an amendment, but I have a question, if that's permissible
We'll
at this
come back-
point.
we'll come
back
back.
to that, fine.
Councillor Kerr, do you have an amendment to this report?
Not got an amendment, Provost, but I can pass you on to our Economic Development Business Manager, Brother Councillor Bundy.
Well, once we've just checked for amendments, we'll be open up the debate. Councillor Spears, do you have an amendment at all?
I don't have an amendment, but I do have a couple of questions.
Okay, thank you. Open up for discussion. Councillor Hannah, do you want to come in first?
Thank you, Provost. I would reiterate the commendations, not condemnations, the commendations for the staff who've been involved in pulling this together. I'm assuming, looking at the consultation that has been involved, given the difficult circumstances under which that has occurred over the last couple of years, I'm assuming that has been primarily electronic forms of consultation. but I would like to know a little more about the consultation that has taken place, but also in looking forward to the future and the fact that we will be having annual reviews. I'd like to hear a bit more about the consultation that will go on in that, because this plan is going to change considerably over the coming years, and I think it's important that we are looking forward and planning forward to listening to our communities and what they think, how they think we're doing and how they think we can improve on what we're doing.
Thanks, Councillor Hara. Mr. Laurie, would you like to address some of these questions?
Yes, thank you, Provost. As set out in the report, in terms of public consultation, what we've done is we've used the consultation which was done for the Falkirk plan, the wider community plan, as a basis for this plan as well. Now, in terms of the community plan, there was a wide-ranging consultation that was partly with the public, but it was also partly with our partners and other groups that were working towards that plan. And of course, what we have is an ongoing process of consultation. So we've created the communities team in recent years. That's our central point for consultation. And they led the consultation on the community plan. We can certainly provide more details of that if members who weren't here at the time would like to see that. But it was extensive, it was broad-ranging, and the Community Planning Partnership, I think, recognised that in terms of its approval of the Falkirk plan. In terms of moving forward, and the report says that that feedback is still very relevant, and I think that's true. But given that things are changing so rapidly, the emergence of the cost of living crisis, not least, I think it's really important that we're consulting and open with our communities at all stages. So there'll be consultation in relation, for example, to the budget, ongoing consultation in relation to a series of projects that we'll be taking forward. So for me, whilst there's no formal plan in place at this stage for an annual consultation process specifically in relation to the council plan, we do need to build on the good work that's been done through the communities team and continue to be open and listening to our communities as we move this forward year by year.
Thank you, Mr. Laurie. Would you like to come back to that, Councillor Hannah?
Just to say thank you for that, and I just hope that we can begin to develop a kind of open consultation process that is going to enable our communities to have their say on this, because things are going to be changing quite considerably, and I think the priorities of our communities have to be at the centre of all we're doing.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, Provost. We support the principles of the plan, but we've just got a couple of questions for clarification. We've got 3 priorities, but measuring the success, we've got 18 success measures for one, 22 for another, and 24 for the third one. Isn't this spreading ourselves a bit too thin in terms of focus and accountability? And are there any ways to prioritise the success measures so we know that we're going in the right direction?
Thank you, Mr. Laurie.
I mean, that's a really interesting question, I think. I think it's always a challenge to determine what kind of volume and range of success measures we should have in place. I mean, those that are there have come about as a result of very considerable thought and consultation within the organisation. Quite a number of them are measures that we are taking annually anyway, because they're parts of the local government benchmarking framework, for example, are required for other returns. So I think we need to be alive to that issue. We're satisfied at this stage that the number of indicators we have is sufficient to give us a good sense of whether we're making the progress we need to make, but not overly burdensome. And I think some members might remember previous plans that had vast numbers of indicators which did prove difficult to monitor and follow. So, but I suppose in a way similar to the previous question, we're going to review this each year. Reports will come forward in relation to success measures to the scrutiny committee for consideration, and I think we need to be open to that. If members are telling us that actually the volume of indicators is too great, that is certainly something we're happy to review.
Thank you, Mr. Laurie. Any other questions, Councillor Bundy?
Yes, I have two more. During the rest of the reports in the whole, all the other agendas in the full report, there's little mention of the council plan. So I'm just wondering what role it's actually playing in shaping agendas.
Mr. Laurie?
I think given the nature of the challenges we currently face, I mean, both in terms of the issues facing our communities and also in terms of the financial strategy, the view certainly that we've shared as a corporate management team is we need to become much more focused on ensuring that in our reports and as we move forward, we are referencing these priorities and making the connection. So if the plan is agreed today, then our intention is to be much more robust in terms of making that reference when in each report where we have the initial sections about the purpose of the report. We feel at that point it would be helpful to tie the reports into the relevant part of the council plan.
Question. Thank you. And the final question is about one of the key themes is about being responsive. So I didn't see anything about data collection and data analysis and ensuring that we are responding to events as they happen and just basing it off the data and trends. So is there any data analysis happening for decision making? Thank you.
The answer to that is yes. I mean, the use of data and the better use of data in the organisation is something which I think we all regard as really important. And I think there's probably examples service by service where which we could talk about in relation to that. But I wonder if on this point, Provost, I might just turn to Rebecca Mcdonald, our change manager, who might be able to provide a fuller response on that.
Okay, Mrs. Mcdonald, are you there?
Yes, good morning, Provost, and thank you. Just to pick up on the point, it is our intention through the performance management framework that the Chief Executive mentioned earlier to undertake a project that will enable us to be more tighten our data collation, centralise that data collation and allow us to really be more robust with our evidence-based information that feeds projects and programmes and plans that will come from the council plan. So that piece of work we intend to kind of take through early doors in 2023 to make sure we are as top of our game as we can be with regard to using data and that evidence-based approach to enable, you know, good and informed decision making. As Chief Executive said, that data and information is already sort of stored and used within services to inform the projects and plans that are underway just now, but we do want to up our game and the council plan gives us the lever to pull to do that. So over the course of 2023, you will see evidence of a project that will emerge to improve our approach to all of this, and it will flow through to the scrutiny committee with the performance updates that will be provided, as the Chief Executive mentioned. So thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Mrs. McDonald. Any more questions, Councillor Bundy?
That's me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spears?
Thank you, Provost. If I can take you to agenda item 3.1, climate change. You use the words ambitions. As the country enters recession and climate change, the fight against climate change or the climate emergency does not come without costs. And as we look forward don't look forward to a budget where we're going to have to implement quite draconian cuts to this district, we'll be on track to meet the target of the 2024 net zero.
Kenneth?
Yes, thank you, Provost. I mean, I think it's exceptionally important that we retain our ambition in relation to the climate challenge or the climate emergency, as you rightly say. And the third priority in the plan is all about that that focus. In terms of whether we meet the 2030 target or not, I mean, that is going to depend to a large degree on decisions that councillors take. Decisions in relation to fleet, decisions in relation to buildings, decisions in relation to waste, decisions in relation to the capital programme. So it is exceptionally challenging because of the financial position, but there will be questions for and reports brought forward whereby the council can take decisions both within the budget and elsewhere as to what priority attaches to the climate emergency.
Well, I would say that any action is better than no action, but the word emergency is not just used for emotive reasons. It's because there is a climate emergency, and we need to demonstrate very clearly to the district and our constituents and the residents in the whole of Falkirk district that we will be there to take positive action and try and hold the government to account who are giving out these dates that if they keep cutting the income to this council, then we're running into real difficulties.
Any more questions, Councillor Spears? Is that you? Thank you. So we have a motion moved and seconded.
I still have a couple of questions, sorry. The council plan, we're being asked to approve this for the next 5 years. You have to ask yourself, how realistic is this plan, especially when you take into account the future budget implications? I believe we're looking at something like 60–70 million pounds to get sliced off our council budget in the next 4 or 5 years. So how realistic is this in relation to the financial implications? And the other point I wanted to make in relation to the council plan was, why is the heating being switched off in this building? Has that got something to do with other agenda items, or am I just being... It's certainly not a healthy atmosphere to work in this temperature.
In the absence of the temporary absence of the provost, in terms of realism, I mean, it's a reasonable point. I suppose that's precisely why we've said we need to review this annually. That's closely tied into the financial strategy. We need to review annually because things are changing rapidly, and we need to ensure that the council plan is set in that context and revised in that context as the financial position changes and as we monitor our performance against it. In terms of the heating of this building, I can't answer that question. I hadn't noticed it was anything other than a pleasant temperature.
Well, I'm sorry, Chief Executive, but there's members here sitting with gloves on, so it is cold.
I think, Councillor Nimmo, you'll find that the majority of our senior citizens are sitting in the cold as well just now.
Absolutely, I appreciate that as well.
John's coming, sir. I've got Councillor Steenbank next with a question.
Right, Councillor Steenbank.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm just turning back to the sort of detail of the plan, and I do appreciate that I've asked a few questions and we've had dialogue on this before, Chief Executive, but it's just in regards to the community asset transfer programmes which are under supporting stronger and healthier communities. If you look at page 55, that in terms of success measures, we're looking at 2 as the number of asset transfers per year for community ownership. I think we previously clarified that as per annum, just for the clarity of this question. How are we looking to directly and effectively monitor the success of community projects, and how are we incentivising take-up on projects that might have fantastic effort and community engagement built into them, but not necessarily the resourcing behind them to get a community asset transfer over the line? And how can this plan help reassure potential take-ups of CAT that they could potentially have a project in their community and not to get disheartened whilst looking for funding in various areas of the council?
Mr. Laurie.
I think for a detailed response to community asset transfer, I have to call on colleagues. I'm not sure if Malcolm's able to pick up on that one.
Mr. Berry.
Through you, Provost. The community asset transfer activity is a kind of partnership between the communities team and the assets team within Play Services. So you see the performance measures in the plan at the moment are to ensure that we get 2 full transfers and 2 leases per year. So that's how we'll judge it. But I'm happy to get a briefing on the community asset transfer activity that's ongoing, if that would be helpful for yourself.
Yeah, no, that would be, again, a useful resource. It's more how we can improve by using this plan and the sort of objectives, putting it into a certain priority to incentivise, I think, groups that might not feel the resourcing had previously been there. And obviously with stuff like community choices coming forward in various aspects of programmes in the council, we could potentially give groups hope where there wasn't necessarily before.
Thank you, Councillor Steinbach. Mr. Gillespie, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Provost, for letting me in here, and just to maybe help augment what Malcolm said there. Certainly, this would be through the communities team itself. It's one of the things we've recognised through the Falkirk plan about supporting our communities, and part of the council's decision to move part of community learning and development within the communities team as well, to support the communities, to actually help them and empower them more. One of the things, as you'd mentioned there, was about community choices, and this was our first step about making that information aware to our communities to make them stronger and more aware. So certainly the team have started that. There is 2 sets of team within the community team, and as our Chief Executive said in an earlier response, that was the idea of building up that team. We have these measures in place, and we're confident with the resources we have and the closer working with relationships with our communities that we're going to invest the time to support them to take it forward, and rather than just leaving them to look at what resources are out there.
Thank you, Mr. Gillespie.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Councillor Deacon.
I just have thanks, Professor. I've just got a wee bit of clarification. Page 57, the street cleanliness score, Scotland value is 90.10. We're aiming for 81.12. And the CO2 emissions, Scotland value is 4.09, 3.61. In the better value cases where the Scotland value is the better option, why are we not aiming to try and get the baseline to the same as the Scotland value, specifically on street cleanliness score? Because there is a lot of trash out there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Benny.
Through you, Provost. That score reflects the fact that during COVID, the street cleansing was not considered to be an emergency sort of provision, and during the period the street cleanliness score dropped to a level which would be below what Falkirk Council would normally expect. So that figure of 81.12% represents a kind of recovery journey position, and obviously this would be a 5-year plan to which I would expect us to, incrementally rise back up to a position. I guess the caveat to that would be dependent upon resources, that we allocate over the coming 5 years to those tasks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Benny, is that a satisfactory answer? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's regarding 5.8. But I think we're all very mindful the world's very volatile at the moment, and obviously the 3 things covered: climate change and the cost of living is affecting us. I do appreciate in 5.8, given the uncertain financial outlook, this will make sure the council takes stock of commitments and resources at regular intervals. But my question is, what vehicle have we got at the moment that alerts us to the crisis, and what arrangements are in place that we can meet immediately to deal with something? And also, what can the council do being proactive with that? Because the world is changing very quickly, and things is happening to our community very quickly. So How can we be proactive, and what is the arrangements for contingency plans if there is a change with these three things that I mentioned? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Binney. Mr. Laurie.
I mean, as a council, we're monitoring our performance against the plan. We're monitoring our financial position. We're working with communities on a daily basis and on various projects with our communities. So I think that throughout, and we've got a huge amount of contact across our front line, right across our services, with the concerns and the anxieties and the issues that face communities. And as councillors, you're very much, at the front end of that as well. So I think as a council, we have the ability to change course, to bring forward reports, to take decisions as the situation changes. So I'm not concerned about our ability to do that. I'm concerned about some of the issues that may arise because of the financial crisis, because of the cost of living crisis and the pressures that will put on us. But we do have the mechanisms to respond, and I think it's really important. I suppose thinking back to the best value review, where it talked about collaborative leadership and decision making, that if we sense there's issues which we need then to respond to, we will bring forward the necessary reports. We will discuss them and debate them in this chamber, and we need to take the decisions that respond to the needs of our communities and indeed the financial challenges that we face. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Gives me some reassurance. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Binney. So we have a motion moved and seconded. We don't have any amendments. Can we agree the report?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Next item of business is the financial strategy, and after this item we'll take a 10-15 minute comfort break. This is a report by Director of Transformation, Communities and Corporate Services, pages 60 to 102. Mrs. Templeman.
Thank you, Provost. This report presents the Council's financial strategy for approval. And as we've heard, the strategy sits within the Council's planning framework and sets out the financial context that the Council's operating within. However, as we've seen in the last week or so, the economy is extremely volatile and the position can change very rapidly. So the strategy is a baseline position, and future reports will outline changes against that baseline position. The document includes information on housing for both revenue and capital and general fund capital. However, today in this presentation, I will focus on the general fund revenue position, which is the area facing the greatest and most immediate pressures. So the strategy presented today has broadly two sections. The first outlining the financial position and the second setting out the approach to balancing the budget gap. The first section serves a number of purposes. It emphasises the importance of financial sustainability in supporting the Council to deliver its visions and priorities, and recognises that the Council's Best Value Audit Report has emphasised that Falkirk needs to make significant progress in this area. It also puts the Council's finances into the wider economic context, explaining that the pressures facing households in terms of rising costs are also impacting directly on the Council. It explains how the Council's finances work, with a focus on the general fund revenue side in particular, setting out the sources of income and explaining the largest areas of spend and biggest areas of cost pressure. And on page 85 of the agenda, the strategy shows the culmination of all the assumptions that we're making at this point in time on the Council's income and expenditure. And that's what's giving us the forecast gaps, which total 69 million over the next 4 years, with the biggest pressure coming in 23-24. The reason that the strategy has been laid out in this way is to try and improve the collective understanding of how the Council's finances operate and to provide a clear context for decision making going forward. This document should serve as an anchor point so that when decisions are being taken, they will refer back to the document and be seen in this context. A shared understanding of the problem should help the Council to take decisions in a collaborative way, and it's intended that service proposals with financial implications will be brought to members for consideration throughout the year and not solely as part of the budget setting exercise in February or March. The document will also serve to underpin consultation exercises that are undertaken with our communities, again to try and ensure that there's a shared understanding of the Council's financial challenges. And whilst the covering report doesn't cover budget consultation work, a draft engagement plan is being developed and discussed by officers at the moment. The second section of the document, from page 86 onwards, sets out the Council's approach to balancing the gap. And there's two main approaches. The first is labelled corporate accounting proposals, and the second is service proposals, and I'll touch briefly on both of these. Corporate accounting proposals covers three main points: service concessions, council tax and borrowing. Service concessions are explained in more detail on page 87 of the agenda. And just to flag that this is a really complex area and work is ongoing to try and quantify the potential benefits and the impact that this option will have. And it's perhaps worth noting that the final guidance on this area was just issued by the Scottish Government earlier this month, so it's very much a work in progress. We are likely to ask our Treasury advisors to assist us with these detailed calculations. So at this point, it's not possible to quantify the potential benefit from this area, but we hope that we'll be able to do that within the next couple of months. The council tax strategy is set out on page 88 of the agenda and charts an approach to gradually increase council tax so that Falkirk's charge is more in line with the Scottish national average. It's important to remember that the £69 million gap that's already shown in the document already assumes an increase of 3% per annum. So an increase of less than 3% would add to that £69 million gap, and an increase of more than 3% would reduce that gap. The strategy is suggesting an increase of 4% per annum, which would see the Falkirk average Band D charge reach almost the assumed Scottish average charge by 27-28. At this point, we're not looking for approval to increase the council tax rate, and there will be a further council tax setting report coming to members as part of the budget exercise. However, we are asking members to agree the approach in principle and note that an EPIA will be prepared in advance of the budget meeting. Reference has also been made to the impact of reducing borrowing for capital investment purposes, and an explanation provided of the impact of borrowing on the revenue budget, and that's included in pages 90 and 91 of the agenda. There's no specific proposals included in the strategy for this point at this stage. Page 92 of the agenda goes on to set out the approach to service proposals and the three routes to financial savings, which are transformation, improvement activities and service reductions. Given the scale of the gap, it's likely that all of these routes will have to be used to balance the budget, and the Council will be asked to consider what it can reduce, stop or transfer. The Council's approach to transformation is important and was an issue raised in the Council's Best Value Assurance report, and the review of the Council's approach to transformation was considered by the Executive in August this year and is reflected in the strategy document. It is important that there's clear alignment between the Council's transformation work and the Council's financial position, and the strategy aims to ensure that the links are clearly made and that there's improved reporting on progress with our transformation work going forward. Transformation is clearly the best option for the Council. Ideally, our transformation work will allow us to improve outcomes for our communities and save money at the same time. These types of projects are difficult to identify, but officers are committed to taking this approach as much as possible. Projects in the Council of the Future Transformation Programme totalling £10 million are set out on page 94. These projects continue to be developed and refined and will be reported through the revised governance structure as reported to the Executive in August. Page 95 highlights that Chief Officers are also working to identify improvement projects and service reductions that will result in financial savings for the Council. This is very much a work in progress, with future reports and updates expected to come back to members. At this time, services have identified around 12 million of options which would fit into these categories. And the table on page 96 summarises the position as things currently stand. If all the options identified to date were taken, the gap would reduce from 69 million to 43 million, with a gap of almost 28 million falling to next year. So clearly there's still a huge amount of work to do, and over the next few months we'll be refining our assumptions as more detailed and definitive information becomes available. And again, I would like to stress that the current estimate is based on the best information at this time, and it is very much a moving feast. We'll be working to get a better understanding of the potential benefits of service concessions, as I've said, and we'll be working with services to identify more options for transformation, improvement and reduction, and where necessary, preparing reports to members for decision. As well as these tasks, a further 2 are set out in paragraphs 5.4.4 and 5.4.5 of the covering report, which is on page 65 of the agenda. Those 2 actions are the review of the use of a target operating model for the council. So we want to consider how this type of model has been used in other councils and how effective it has been for other councils. However, I think it's really important to note that whilst this process may help shape some of our decision making, it will not take away the need for difficult decisions to be taken. We also propose that a financial strategy group is set up to replace the budget working group. That group would be chaired by the Chief Executive and would consist of group leaders and the finance spokespersons from each group. And if approved, the aim would be to have a first meeting of that group as quickly as possible and agree a terms of reference. And again, that's a key part of our work in improving collaborative leadership going forward. I'm happy to take any questions, Provost.
Thank you, Mrs. Templeman. Mr. Laurie would like to come out at this moment.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. I'm very grateful to Amanda and our colleagues for the excellent work in bringing forward the financial strategy. I just wanted to say a couple of things. I mean, firstly, members will recall that financial sustainability is one of the 2 key issues that emerged from our best value audit, which was published earlier this year. And of course, since then, recent developments in terms of inflation, energy, pay, cost of living crisis have only made the challenge much greater. So that figure of 69 million is an enormous figure for the council to bridge. It is unprecedented for us. I think it's really important to recognise that. And I think unless or until we really get to grips with the issue of financial sustainability, we're always going to be on the back foot, because we'll be too focused on the seemingly endless search for budget savings rather than maximising our performance within the resources that we have in delivering on the council plan, which the council has just agreed. So the financial strategy is a really important first step towards addressing that. And whilst wherever possible, we will seek savings through transformation and improvement activity, as Amanda has said, it is to my mind inconceivable that we will bridge the budget gap without service reductions. And I think we need to recognise that. And that does mean really difficult decisions will need to be taken. And we'll need to start on that early. We can't just wait again. As Amanda said, we can't just bring everything forward as part of the budget process. We need to be on the front foot in relation to that. It also means that the whole issue around about collaborative leadership is really important, and members will recall that that was the other big issue that emerged from the best value audit. There will need to be strong and effective joint working across the council to deal with this scale of challenge, and all councillors have an important role to play in that. It will also be essential to exercise tight control on in-year spend. So the last report, or the report on the financial position that came to the last meeting of the executive, projected that we will be close to 2 million over budget at the end of the current year. That's not a sustainable position, and will further limit the council's ability to deal with its budget gap. So one action that the corporate management team has agreed is a recruitment freeze on non-essential posts, and that will help to limit spend in the current year and protect the council's reserves. Additional actions will be taken to manage the financial position, and where necessary, member approval will be sought. So, Provost, this is a really important report. I think it's the first time we've had the financial challenge in terms of sustainability set out so comprehensively and so well, and that is exceptionally important given the sheer scale of the challenge the council now faces. And I just wanted to make these points before the debate started.
Thank you very much, Mr. Laurie. Councillor Meikle-John, do you have a motion?
Yes, I do, Provost. Thank you. And again, like the council planner, I just want to pay tribute to the finance team who have been pulling together this financial strategy to match our aspirations within our council plan. That is no mean feat, particularly in the current climate. And I know that work continues to be ongoing in that in order to ensure that they deliver on behalf of all the members of the council. But when we look at even the last few days to how things have changed to when this report was written, it does just bring home just how challenging a financial environment we're in. Currently have the Bank of England predicting that the size of the UK economy is going to fall within the next 12 months and will enter a recession. Nationally, that means there's going to be less jobs, less company profits, less taxes, poorer settlements for local government, and as a result we're going to see inequalities. And that all has to be done in the context of both Scottish Government and local government being dependent on the UK Government for grant. We can't get away from that. There are so many uncertainties within the economy, making it very difficult to predict and to plan over the next 5 years. Uncertainty will have to be taken into account as part of our financial planning, not just but throughout the year as things are so variable. Best Value report, as the Chief Executive just said, highlighted that the need for robust financial planning in order to give the Council that financial sustainability. It was critical over the reliance on use of reserves in the past and the delays in taking key decisions and the lack of pace around transformation of services, all of which has contributed to the high budget gaps over the last few years and the inability to invest. The financial strategy still gives elected members a democratic decision making, but sets a clear direction of travel, and that's where we need to actually get to a common agreement on. We will need to use all the tools available for us to be able to meet our budget each year, and they are set out in the papers at Director of Finance. To date, just under half the savings have been identified, leaving significantly more to do. All these savings are likely to be us much more challenging than ever before. Compounded by the magnitude of this year's gap, it will therefore be important that decisions are taken at an early stage, as they will require much more work and lead-in time in order to be delivered. This will involve elected members engaging with the budget process at a much earlier stage than previously, and having very frank discussions. The previous budget working group did not work as effectively as it should have. There's an opportunity in a new council and a fresh start. Therefore, I would support the proposal for the Member Officer Financial Strategy Group to do that collaborative work and develop a strategy and budget proposals. What is clear is it will require to either stop delivering some services or look at how we can deliver them differently in the future. The more we can transform, the less we'll have to consider stopping, and that's why the Council of the Future Change programme will be critical to driving forward savings proposals. And while there's been much positive progress following the programme, much still needs to be done in order to a 5-year gap of 6 years. Tax is one of the key enablers within the strategy to meet our priorities within the council plan, and 20% of our income. While Falkirk has a history of low council tax, having been lower than the Scottish average in 2011 with the council tax freeze, where there was a year-on-year 3% increase over a 10-year period, we are still starting from a much lower base. It left us disadvantaged and has contributed to the high budget gaps last year and this year, and the reliance on use of reserves to meet our budget gap, which is no longer sustainable. The financial strategy is a framework to work within. Without the council tax strategy, being agreed, and having an annual and returning to purely an annual setting of the council tax will impact on the ability to have a robust plan in order to meet our future commitments, placing greater reliance on service transformation and cuts. Council budgets are pressured, as the Scottish Government, who have a finite budget, competing priorities and very limited borrowing. There's only so many ways you can cut a cake, so we are relying on UK Government for settlements. In the current climate, it's irresponsible and unrealistic not to work towards the Scottish average of the council tax and indeed a false economy. Perhaps the UK Government should not have cut tax rates for higher earners and use that to help public services. While difficult at this time, those that are on the lowest income will remain to be protected. I therefore move the recommendations in this paper, including the agreement on the council tax strategy, which will assist with future planning, subject to agreement as part of the budget process. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Meikle. John, do you have a seconder?
I formally second and reserve the right to come back in.
Thank you. Councillor Hannah, do you have a notice of an amendment?
I don't currently have a notice of amendment, but would reserve the right after we've had an opportunity to ask some further questions, depending on the answer to those questions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kerr, do you have notice of an amendment?
We have an amendment, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Spears, do you have notice of an amendment?
No, but I do have some questions.
Okay.
Firstly, can people hear for this side of the room? I know there's difficulty with the technology. With the leader of the administration, it was very difficult to hear her. And
Okay,
the cameras are off.
How's
this
everybody
side.
for hearing? Okay?
Must just be this end.
Must be.
To speak to his amendment, and we can display it after he's finished his speech.
Okay. Councillor Kerr, would you like to speak to your amendment, please?
Thank you, Provost. I think on page 79 and 80 clearly states the obvious. The council is usually reliant on government grant. The ratio of government grant funding to council tax is 80-20. This means that a 1% reduction in the government grant equals to £3 million. Would require to increase of over 4.3 in council tax to make up the difference. However, it is important to note that for budgeting purposes, the council already assumes an increase of 3% annually. Nationally, funding to local government reduced by 4.2% in real terms between 2013 and 2021, excluding COVID funding, as shown in the chart below. In addition to this pressure, there has been an increase in the amount of grants which has been ring-fenced for specific policy delivery in local government. For example, spending early years provision has increased nationally due to Scottish Government ring-fence funding. However, due to the overall reduction in funding, this means that other areas in the council budget are subject to spending cuts. In May 2022, the Scottish Government published the Resource Spending Review, setting a high level of Parliament for resource spending in 2026-27. The spending plan shows a settlement for local government remains at the 22-23 level until 25-26, with an increase of 100 million nationally in 2026-27, a 0.9% increase to 10.616 million. The Scottish Government Information Centre produced a brief paper in June 22, which considered the impact of the review. This demonstrates that local government would be faced with a reduction in funding of 7% in real terms over the period of the RSR. That was based on the information at the time, and this is before inflation. We agree with the recommendations of 1, 3 and 4, Provost, but our amendment is to delete item 2 until the budget meeting. We're not saying we're not going to support anything. All we're saying is we would like it deleted until the budget. I've give Mr Perry the amendment by email. As simple as that, just to delete item 2 until the budget meeting. Thank you, Provost.
So I think, Deputy Provost, the amendment moved by Councillor Kerr is very clear. There are 4 items in the recommendations which forms the motion moved by the Leader of the Council, and Councillor Kerr's amendment is simply to delete the second of those in relation to the council tax strategy. So Deputy Provost, I think we just need to see if we have a seconder for the amendment.
Okay, do you have a seconder for that?
Happy to second.
Okay, thank you.
We've got an amendment moved and seconded, so I'd just like to open it up for debate. Any questions, Councillor Spears?
Thank you. It's really just a question. Well, 2 questions, in fact. I agree with the motion that's coming forward. The budget should be for the budget, and to set not just guidelines but rules for the budget before we've come to the budget is demeaning that particular budget. We have, can everybody hear okay? I know there's difficulty with the technology on this side of the room. Is it?
We can hear you loud and clear, Councillor Spears.
Right, in fact, it's mainly for people outside. I know they can't see anything, but the Chief Executive was very explicit that, you know, we're cut to the bone now, I think, and the only thing when you're cut to the bone is amputation. So my question is fairly simple, and it'll be the question that most people out there and our workforce are asking quite explicitly. Will there be redundancies because of this forthcoming budget?
Mr. Laurie?
I'm not going to preempt that at this stage. The comment I made was that I see a very difficult route forward without service cuts. Service cuts are inevitable. How we manage that is the critical issue. And previously, the council, whilst it doesn't have a no redundancies policy, has always managed to avoid making compulsory redundancies. I think that becomes increasingly challenging as we move forward, particularly if the transformational and other decisions which will come before the council aren't taken.
Councillor Spears, do you want to come back on that? Was that a satisfactory answer?
No, there's concerns here. I mean, we've already had a scrutiny committee where the education convener has said that pools will close, things will close. If you're closing some of these facilities, you can't keep employing the people that run these facilities. So we need clear definitions here. People, if they're looking at part of their workforce, if they're going to be redeployed or they're going to have to find a job somewhere else, just to say it's somewhere down the line and we live in hope, we need to be very clear here because our employees expect that of us.
19.1, Provost. As the education convener, can I just...
Okay, thank you. Councillor Murtagh.
Thank you. As education convener, I'd just like to correct that I have never said that in a scrutiny committee, and that to give that impression is irresponsible and is not the accurate position of what has been said.
Sorry, it was the Director of Education. My apologies.
I don't believe that's what he said either. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hannah? Or Nimmo first?
I think Councillor Nimmo was first.
Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Provost. Last year, the SNP increased the council tax by 4% with no real benefit to the public except for further cuts in service delivery. Now, we're all getting complaints from members of the public regarding things that aren't getting done in our wards. Labour last year quite rightly voted against the last SNP budget cuts, and is against a further increase in the council tax at this point. What we're trying to do is try and financially protect the vulnerable out there who can't afford an increase, and I think this is the way to do it. So we will be supporting the Tory amendment. Thanks, Provost.
Thanks, Councillor Nemo. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Provost. I would like to say that, first of all, I welcome the setting up of a financial strategy group. I have raised these issues about the importance of us collaborating and the importance of collaborative leadership. And I'm really keen. I have heard a great deal about what's in the best value review, and how important collaborative leadership is on the council to take us forward. And I am absolutely 100% committed to working together with all parties and with council officers in trying to come to the best deal we can for our local communities. But I have to make a point here about the nature of collaborative leadership. Collaborative leadership is not a one-way process. Collaborative leadership has to work in a number of different ways. And I think it's important that information is shared, and that information is shared openly and honestly and at early opportunities. And I have to say that, sadly, in relation to a number of issues that I have raised these issues with officers and other councillors, the information sharing has been less than I would have liked to see. I would also suggest that point 2 of the recommendations is, in some respects, evidence of that. We set up a financial strategy group, but then we are going to take some things out of the purview of that financial strategy group in terms of discussions. And I think that is somewhat troubling to me. And for that reason, I would be supporting the amendment that James Kerr has put forward, because I think that if you have a financial strategy group, you need a group that is going to be given the information and the remit to look at those financial issues.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. Any other questions? Councillor Colley.
Yeah, just a couple of questions on practical information. I think we are all extremely keen to protect the most vulnerable in our communities. So I actually wanted to ask a question around the EPIA, and I think the equality and poverty impact assessments, these certainly should help inform our decisions, and in relation to what they contain, particularly in relation to a council tax, is around the household profiles for what information will be available in relation to that. So the household profiles, how many people who receive full council tax reduction, how many people receive reductions in other ways or are ignored for council tax purposes, but equally to try and get a balance of how we understand the incomes of individuals, particularly in relation to energy costs. And we know that there's been support come forward both through the UK, but also through the Scottish Government. So to try and get a bit of a picture of what those profiles look like to help inform our decision making. And it was just really a question of how detailed the EPI will be.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Colley. Who will answer that, Mr. Benning? Oh, it's yourself, Mrs. Templeman.
Thank you, Provost. So we've started to look at how we'll prepare the EPIA, and I suppose just as a sort of baseline position at the moment, there's about 13,000 people who are fully protected from an increase in their council tax. We would expect that if the charge increased, the number protected would increase as well, but we need to model that out. So that's the type of modelling we want to do for the EPIA. Paul Ferguson, who's our Revenues and Benefits Manager, he has started to work on that and been looking at some examples, sort of which may be helpful for the financial strategy group to consider, looking at different scenarios of different levels of income. Obviously, there's so many different types of income level and a benefits level out there. So we're trying to sort of, as part of the EPIA work, trying to look at the type of people that may be impacted and what mitigations are in place where possible. I think that one of the points I'd make is that we said in the strategy that to balance the budget, we either reduce spend or increase income. So if we need to be clear, if we choose not to increase the income, that we're comfortable that the reduction in spend is the better option. And I think that's the challenge that we face. Thank you.
Councillor Bush.
Thank you, Provost, as I did reserve earlier on. I found this quite interesting. It's been, and I don't mean to go into history too much here, but in the last 5 years, it's been interesting in the lessons that we've learned, and particularly last year, I think it showed when we were showing figures that smaller councils actually have a bigger return from council tax than what Falkirk does. It shows you at a time when a decision was made, and I'm not complaining about that decision, to keep council tax rates low. It's ultimately given us a problem over the years because we've not been able to catch that up. I appreciate where the Conservative group are coming from. I think we've got to remember that we're not talking about, and I assume we're not, because sorry, I was listening quite hopefully intently. I don't think you'd, and I think you were comfortable with the 3%, and it was just a concern on going over. Am I right on that?
We just thought it wasn't at the right time to bring this forward when we're not even got the group up and running yet. So we were uncomfortable making a decision at the moment. Similar to Councillor Hannah says, until the group have their meeting and get together to make a decision before that group's even started, we didn't think it was right, and that's why we've asked it to be until
in that case, what it's looking to do here is to agree a principle, not agree a rate. I think it's just been mentioned there just now by our Director of Finance that we have to put the strategy together on whether we're going to look on income or we're going to reduce spending. And if we're going to, because I think I hope we learnt this in the last years, and I'm not. I appreciate there's a number of councillors who are new to here, but we've learnt this over the last couple of years, that focusing on the spending side of it is really not where this council wants to be. We want to focus more on the income. This is a strategy. It's not fixing it. It says it quite clearly. Agree in principle, the council tax strategy, and note that the formal council tax approval will be required as part of the revenue budget settings. It's about bringing us to a median on Scottish council tax. We are, and it has been helpful, very low. When you say, oh, he's wanting to put up council tax, if we were talking about putting up 1% over the 3% next year, you're talking about a cost for a bandee of £1.15 per month. We're not talking about adding on thousands of pounds on this strategy. You're talking over the 6-year period that it would be £73 over the 6-year period. But over a 6-year period, you would expect it to go up, which would be £6 a month difference over that six-year period. So it's not that we're looking here to boost a council tax by enormous amounts to cover anything. It's about having a reasonable strategy that we can actually get to a point where our council tax is hitting the median area. I hope that's clear, and I appreciate, and I can possibly see where the vote's going on this, but we're not talking here about setting a council tax. We're talking about agreeing a strategy amongst ourselves that we have to get to a better position with regards to council tax, because it has cost us literally millions and for many, many years. And I think that's what the Director of Finance was pointing at. I'm also very, very, very conscious of growing income rather than cutting where in finances. But I'm quite happy if you want to concentrate on the cutting finances, then that's what we'll need to work with.
Hey, thanks, Councillor Bowes. Are you coming in to sum up, Councillor Meek? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Provost. I'm sorry if folk can't hear me. I do have a second microphone if this one cuts out. Just wanted to address a number of things, including the amendment. But just on the spending review and just to highlight the trajectories based on assumptions, not on actual fact, on actual what will come to local government, and have to also remember that the Scottish Government has to use the figures that they're given from the UK Treasury in order to be able to do their financial planning, and those could well be adjusted, but at the moment in time that's based on information from UK Treasury, and that's why we have this assumption. That could change in reality. Also, there seems to be a bit of a mismatch here, and what's a strategy? A strategy is only a direction. It's not about making decisions. It's a framework to work within, and that's all that we're being asked to decide today. When it actually comes to the detail of that will go through the financial strategy group. It will be discussed. It will then go to elected members for final decision. Therefore, I don't see how that is then taken out of that strategy process. It's part of a process. And I'm pleased to hear that there is a commitment to that discussion and collaboration, because that, again, is not what's happened in the past. Although I did have discussions with Councillor Bissett and Councillor Kerr in the past, but there was not that open discussion and sharing within the budget working group, and I do hope that that will be a safe place in order to have some very challenging discussions, so that we can take that forward. So I'm pleased that there's a commitment to that. In relation to the council tax, I think we need to look at what could be false economy. We could potentially be making more people coming through different doors and actually having to claim benefit by not raising the council tax, because it does mean that we are going to probably have to reduce services, and that's the bottom line. I think what we have is in agreeing a strategy to go forward on the council tax, the ability to plan for the future, rather than doing it on a salami slice and doing it on an annual basis. And that's what the strategy is all about. That was one of the key criticisms of the Best Value report, is that we were not planning far enough out in our assumptions and putting in the strategy to actually deliver on those. This constrains us in doing that. I would also challenge the fact that the increase in the 4% has delivered nothing. I think we would have had some significant further financial challenges and decisions we would have had to make if we had not have made that decision at that time, in order to do that, and indeed we would have had a larger gap to fill. So I think people are misunderstanding the seriousness of the current circumstances and the situation that we're in, and that is really disappointing. It doesn't bode well for that collaborative leadership going forward, and the sharing of information. And we've seen another example today of that lack of sharing of information, having been landed with a further amendment for another item on this agenda at 9:15 this morning. That is not in the spirit of where we are right now. And on the sharing information, I would just like to highlight that there's been far more sharing of information conversation with other members of the council in this council, and there was in any previous council, and we've always been working towards sharing as much as we possibly can at the right time to be able to do that, and often there can be good reasons for the timing of that. So I'm happy that we stick with our motion, Provost, and do appreciate that there'll be a collaborations elsewhere.
Thanks very much, Councillor Nicol-John. We'll now go to the vote. Mr Moody.
Yes, thank you, Provost. The motion consists of the recommendations set out at paragraph 2 of the report, and that motion is moved by Councillor Nicol-John and seconded by Councillor Bowes, against which there is an amendment which has been moved by Councillor Kerr and seconded by Councillor Bundy, which is deleting item 2 from the recommendations to the Council's tax strategy until the budget meeting. Motion, Provost Bissett.
Amendment.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
For the motion.
Councillor Aitchison.
Amendment.
Councillor Anslow.
Amendment.
Councillor Binney.
Motion.
Councillor Bowes.
Motion.
Councillor Brown.
Amendment.
Councillor Buchanan. Amendment. Councillor Bundy.
Amendment.
Councillor Colley.
Motion.
Councillor Deacon.
Motion.
Councillor Devine.
Motion.
Councillor Flynn.
Amendment.
Councillor Forrest.
Motion.
Councillor Garner.
The motion.
Councillor Hannah.
Amendment.
Councillor Kelly.
Amendment.
Councillor Kerr.
For the amendment.
Councillor McCabe.
Amendment.
Councillor Nicol-John.
For the motion.
Councillor Murtagh.
Motion.
Councillor Nimmo.
Amendment.
Councillor Patterson.
Amendment.
Councillor Patrick.
Amendment.
Councillor Redmond.
Amendment.
Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Robertson.
Motion.
Councillor Sinclair.
Motion.
Councillor Spears.
Amendment.
And Councillor Steinbach.
Amendment.
Provost, there are 12 votes for the motion. There are 18 votes for the amendment. The amendment is carried.
Thank you. We'll now have a 15-minute comfort break back here at 12:05. Thank you.